Good evening and welcome. My name is Dr. Stephanie Nielsen. I am a pharmacist, a board certified clinical nutritionist, and a certified genomics practitioner. And I am so excited to have you here tonight to talk about some of my favorite things, which is food. I love diets. I love eating, but I've tried a lot of diets. And so I know a lot of you just took the poll questions. We're going to get to those in a minute. But I'm going to ask a question right now is why are you here? You can go ahead and just put in the chat. Are you here because you want to learn about a diet? Are you here because you want to know about your DNA and the right diet? Why are you here? Because I'm super excited and I have a great friend with me tonight. Did you notice I did my hair like her? My hair was down. And my beautiful girlfriend just got back from the gym and she pulled her hair up and I'm like, okay, we're going to do the high hair girl thing. And we want to know why you're here so that we can address your idea of the right diet for you. Felicia, can you introduce yourself for our crowd tonight while they are putting it in? And we've got a big crowd. We've got 100, I don't know, 10, 120 people. This is awesome.
I see that. I'm so excited to be here tonight. I love to talk about food. Um, I I don't know what I thrive on food. In fact, some people eat to live. I live to eat. It's one of those things. So I'm that girl that's like, is it time to eat? Because let's eat. My name is Felicia. If y'all don't know, I am a IFBB pro figure competitor. So I've been in this world of eating and what to eat and not to eat. I'm also a personal trainer. So I know what it takes to put food along with working out, kind of how it looks like, but I'm really excited to dive in and talk about all the different kinds of diets that are out there, the food crazes, what works and what doesn't work, and not one size fits all approach. So I'm
Absolutely.
looking forward to it.
And we've got a lot of feedback already.
I
So this is really good.
love
Can
it.
you see this? This is awesome.
Yes.
So we're really chatty. And so we're loving that you're playing along with us. So DNA and the right diet, DNA and the right diet, how to eat correctly, how the diet should match my results, best diet to complement my DNA. So I'm seeing a real theme there. How does my diet, trying to figure out the right diet for me, have a couple just general nutrition. I've had my DNA test and I want to learn how to optimize my health through that. Greg, that result alone, I've got my DNA test and I want to learn to optimize my health. See, I've had a clinic for 25 years and a lot of people came in, I want to do weight loss. I want to do weight loss. And I always told them, I don't do weight loss. I do health gain. When you gain your health, your body will right size, whether it's underweight or overweight. And that actually leads to something. Felicia, I don't know if everybody knows what an IBB pro is, but it means she's a professional bodybuilder. And why did you get into bodybuilding? How did that happen?
Yeah, I have always been that really thin, skinny girl. I all my life I could not gain weight. I was the girl that people made fun of when I was in school because I was so skinny. I am 5'8", and as a freshman in high school, I weighed 102. So you could, as people would say, oh, she's just knees and elbows. You couldn't tell if I was coming or going. I was flat on both sides. I mean, there wasn't any substance to me. And it was, I say it's just like being somebody who is obese because the feelings are still there. It was just as shameful and just as hurtful. And so I found out that I could eat the right foods and gain weight. Now, this happened literally in my 20s when I met my husband now, but he was a power lifter and I was the aerobics instructor, the girl who did all the aerobics. Thin, very, very thin. And he kind of taught me how to lift, that if I lift weights, I could put on muscle, but it took food. Food is very, very important to putting on muscle. So for me, that's where I kind of got into the whole fascination of food and how it works and what it does for your body. So that's where I started to learn how to put on weight in the right food. And we can talk about it later, but competing is a whole nother thing. We look at protein, absolutely has to be a must. Protein, very little carbs, lots of vegetables, no dairy, depending on what, you're striving to be this, but this was my world. And my body changed. It's cool how food really manipulates the structure of your body. And it's a true thing. The body is a phenomenal piece of machinery, and fed the right food under the right circumstances with sleep and recovery, nutrition, it has no choice but to change. But I understand it's a very complicated, well, how do we get there? Because as we'll go through later, that I have tried some diets, I have tried some things of how to get here and there and been unsuccessful at some. And as you know, Dr. Stephanie, it's a learning process, right? It's knowing your body and what your body needs to get to that next level.
Mhm.
Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. Well, and I really love Arvel says food for muscles. And Jonah said, I structure my eating for bio individual results. I love that. That's amazing. So we're all it's in science, we call it an N of one. That means the number one. You are unique. Now it's interesting because our DNA is 99% similar, but you are a unique individual. And just because a diet that works for Felicia may not work for me, but there are similarities. So if I can have my little DNA fairies, please pull up my poll. They're so good. They work in the background. They make us look flawless, you know.
yes, they're phenomenal.
I'm going to pull up the poll. We're going to go through a little bit. What best describes your eating habits? A specific diet, 22%, whether it's keto, vegan, paleo. I try to eat healthy and I don't follow a strict plan. Now that's 64%. Okay. This is not to knock anybody, but here's what I'm going to tell you. For 25 years, I had people tell me, I eat healthy until we started truly keeping a food diary. So I'm going to recommend, here's the first to do. All of you need to keep a food diary for the next 3 to 4 days. Everything that goes in your mouth, good, bad, or ugly, every liquid, every solid, everything. And I want you to also see how you feel. Oh, I had my coffee at 5 o'clock this morning, and I had it with some fiber. I had it with some collagen powder. I had it with some mushroom powder, and I was great till 11 and then I crashed. Or, you know what? I fast. And so I fasted until 10:30 and I couldn't go anymore and I crashed. All of this kind of thing. I didn't poop, but I didn't poop till 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And it wasn't an easy one. It was hard. I want you to write those kind of details, because when you go back after 3 or 4 days and look, and we'll go through a little bit of things today to analyze on, are you eating healthy for your DNA? Well, we'll see. I eat what's convenient without much planning. That was probably going to be the biggest trip up, because it's like, oh, I don't have time. I'll just run through the drive-through. Oh, I don't have time. Life is about planning. And I will tell you, food is the only fuel your body understands. So I want you to think of it this way. What's the nicest car you can think of? Felicia, what's the nicest car you can think of?
Oh, a Bentley.
Okay, so a Bentley. Would you take a Bentley to the crappiest repair place?
Absolutely not.
Would you put in the lowest quality gas?
Absolutely not.
Why not?
Because it's an investment, right? And what I'm putting in is what I'm going to get back out.
That's exactly right. So, but a lot of people will invest more in their vehicles than they will in this temple that we have. Then you can replace your car. If it breaks down on the side of the road, you can leave it on the side of the road or have AAA pick it up or whatever. But this, we don't get to replace. And actually, we replace it every day, but we either replace it with more breakdown or we replace it with build back. Have you ever met anyone who had horrible health and they regained their health through changing their diet or their lifestyle, or, people that were massively overweight, 300, 400, 500 pounds. And now, they have right sized to maybe it's 220, or 250, and 250, some of you may go, well, that's too big. But for somebody who was 400, it's not. Or for somebody who was 85 pounds and they were able to right size to 110 or 120, that's what we're talking about. So planning is only structuring your time to value this temple and nourishing this temple, which is way more important than your car. I struggle with consistency. Okay, we can help you with consistency. Felicia is one of the most disciplined people I know, but your purpose has to be bigger than your plan. Okay.
Absolutely.
So you've got to make a decision. Why is this important to me? So I can tell you at 21, I had cancer and I had tried a whole bunch of diets, kind of ate what I want, was in college, was in pharmacy school. I was very much a vegetarian, except there were no vegetables in sight. I was a breaditarian. I was a dessertitarian. I was a sugaritarian. And guess what? I got gut dysbiosis and yeast overgrowth. I ended up with a yeast infection for 9 months straight that turned into so much inflammation, it became cervical cancer. That's not cool. I was told I could cut it out, burn it out. And they couldn't figure out why my immune system was so low. But they said, here's what we want to do. We want to make you the girl in the plastic bubble, wipe out your immune system, and we'll let it reset, kind of like Control-Alt-Delete on your computer. Well, what would they have fed me? Gluten, dairy, sugar, soda pop, Jell-O, popsicles. Turns out I can't eat sugar because it feeds the yeast. Turns out I'm a celiac, so I can't eat gluten. Turns out I was sensitive to dairy at that point in time, at least the kind of dairy, the fake dairy they were feeding. I would have died. And it was $1 million worth of medical debt. Wasn't willing to go into that. So when you're Scotch Irish, what do? You figure it out. I say, is there any other way I can get through this? They said, you could do it with diet, but it'll take you 2 to 5 years. I said, well, what would that cost? And they said, $2,000 to $5,000, 2 to 5,000, $1 million, 2 to 5,000, $1 million. I can tell you, I would have been dead if I had chosen that $1 million. And then how would that have, they'd done that to my folks? My biggest fear was that I would die. They would leave that $1 million debt to my parents and I would bankrupt them. That I just couldn't do that. So instead I said, I'll take my luck. I can always come back and do this later. They said, sure. So I knew I had a backup plan because I like backup plans. And the bottom line was, in 2 years, I was healthy. All my allergies went away. All my skin rashes went away. My body right-sized. I went from emaciated and skinny fat to robust and strong and vital, and I had good color and my hair grew and it was fabulous because I learned how to eat right for my body. Now, well, let's go to question 2. Which of the current trends have you tried in the past? Keto, 7%, paleo, 2%, interesting, 16% vegan or plant-based, 31% intermittent fasting. Great. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Low carb, 12%, carnivore, 3%, Mediterranean. Okay. So we have a lot of people who are good at big fresh. If you notice our little eating up here, this looks very Mediterranean with a charcuterie board and salad and veggies and beans, legumes, and an other. So in the others, I would love for you to put in the chat what the other is. I met a man the other day who he had a diet. He only eats foods that fall off trees. So he basically lives on fruit and nuts. And I was like, I've never heard of the tree falling diet, but he had, and, unfortunately he was having a lot of health problems. And I said, we may want to round that out a little bit more.
Yeah.
Number 3, what is your main reason for wanting to change or improve? Weight management, 19%. Better digestion, gut health, okay, 20%, about the same. More energy, 9%. Hormone balance, 16%. Longevity and disease prevention. I love it. You are in the right place. We are going to talk about longevity and disease prevention. That's awesome. And again, along the way, we'll right size, whether it means going up or going down in your size. What is optimal for your frame, for your DNA? And what's your age range? Oh, and again, I love it. We're preaching to the choir. So we have 9% that are less than 45, 15% that are 45 to 55, 28% that are 55 to 64, 33% 65 to 74, and 15% that are over 75. I just love that we have these centenarians and octogenarians that are here. And interestingly, how many of you have ever heard about the blue zone diets? You guys can put in, you can put in Y if you, yes, 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 or N if you no, 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 no. Anybody ever heard of the blue zones?
Oh, people are saying yes. Wow.
Yeah. So the blue zones is thought to be several areas around the world where the oldest living people are. Interestingly enough, there are blue zone diet books. There are blue zone, whole web pages. There are blue zone apps. In the last 2 years, the blue zone has been debunked. That yes, there are centenarians, people who are 100 and more, but when they looked at all the different ones, they were all so diametrically opposed. There was a researcher out of Oxford that said the science that they used it was incorrect. However, it's not because of their diets that they have longevity, but there were other factors. Factor one was their fitness. Most of them live in these elevations where they work out more. They walk up a big hill, like in Sardinia, or they garden and get exercise every day. They're cleaning and moving. So as a fitness expert, as much as I love to tout diet, they're now saying those blue zones are about movement and learning to move along with their diet. But the movement is looking like long-term, it may be more important. And how many of you think you move enough? If you think you move enough, put a 1 in the chat. If you don't think you move enough related to your diet, put a 2 in the chat. I got a lot of Y's. 1. A lot of you think you do. Well, there's a few 2s.
There's some 2s.
Okay. Oh, there's some more 2s. Yeah. The 1s were early on it because they were moving so much. So
That's
we're
right.
about evenly split on that. So if you have had your DNA done, you can pull it out, or you probably know you're going to get to watch this later. And I'm going to encourage you to pull it out because we're going to talk about a few of the different diets. And the first one that we're going to talk about is ketogenesis, keto. So as far as keto goes, ketogenesis means that you're utilizing fat instead of carbohydrates for your primary fuel source for the brain, for the muscles. Now, let me tell you why you want to use fat. You want to use fat because every unit of energy, which is called an ATP, every unit of energy from fat produces 16 ATP. That means 16 units of energy for every unit of fat. Every unit of sugar or a carbohydrate produces 2 units of energy. Now, a lot of you just said, and it wasn't the majority, like 20%, said you wanted more energy. If you want more energy, I want you to look at your diet for perhaps utilizing more fat to burn that energy so that you can sustain. One way you can do that, intermittent fasting, because you are spacing out between your meals. And so your body burns off the extra layer of fat if you have that. It also cleans your organs. It also rests your digestion. So keto is appropriate for a lot of people. When we look at ketogenesis, one of the things that we want to do is we want to look at genes that are involved in fat metabolism. So when we look at fat metabolism, the ApoA2 is one of the genes we look at. And when we look at the ApoA2, We want to know, can our body utilize that fat to an optimal result? We also want to look at, does it set me up for weight gain? So with an ApoA2, we have AA, AG, and GG. AA, no association with weight gain based on the quantity of fat consumption. AG, you might have some fat consumption, and with elevated fat consumption, you would put weight on. And with a GG, there is associated weight gain with the altered ghrelin production in response to saturated fat. So one of the things I want you to look up is, how does my body respond to fat? Now, if we've got people who aren't digesting fat and get upset stomachs or their gallbladder goes, that's another story, which we can go to in a minute. But what do you find? Have you ever done keto, Felicia?
I have not. No.
Okay.
Honestly, because of the high fat, I have always been, I've strayed away from that. But I know in some people it works very, very well. As I know a lot of athletes, though, like to be in keto because for them it helps. I honestly, though, have not tried it. I know that isn't it really also good for diabetics, though, too?
It
The keto
is.
diet? Yeah.
Mhm. So with ketosis, you are helping also stabilize your blood sugar,
Hmm.
and you utilize less of your blood sugar needs. And so a lot of diabetics are recommended to be a keto-like or a keto-light type diet, where they're cutting out a lot of their carbohydrates, because the carbohydrates are bags of starch. So the carbohydrates are disaccharides and polysaccharides and monosaccharides, and those little saccharides break into sugars to manage. So the more sugar you have, we'll get into carb metabolism in a few minutes, but look at your ApoA2 with your fat production. When we're talking about diabetes, we also want to look at our TCF7L2. This is optimal insulin response. Now, here's one of the things, and Felicia, we can talk about this with your body sculpting and training and things. Insulin is a storage hormone. With insulin being a storage hormone, when you wake up, if you've ever had your blood work done, what does your doctor say? I want you to use your fasting blood sugar. Okay. That means no, you can't have coffee with sugar and cream in it. No, you can't have a bagel before you go. You got to get up and water or nothing. You go get your blood drawn, and then it comes back. We want you between 80 and 100. I like people about 90, 95. If it's over 100, your insulin sensitivity receptors may be weakening. And when your insulin isn't as sensitive, that's when we get high blood sugars. So if you have, when you eat, your insulin, your blood sugar spikes, insulin grabs it and packs it away. And when it packs it away, it stores. Remember, I said insulin was a storage hormone. So you're either in high sugar mode, you're in burn mode, or you're in storage mode. If you let it go too long, excuse me, then you'll go into starvation mode. And in that starvation storage, the body goes, I don't think I'm ever going to get fed again. I cannot release it. So Felicia, tell us a little bit about how you timed your meals for storage, for burning, to end up becoming a competitor, because even those little tips will make a difference in how people can time their foods to eat a more beneficial diet for themselves.
Sure. Well, first and foremost, it's all about protein, like I said. So try to get as much protein in the beginning of the day as I could. It's eating a competitor's diet is eating every 3 to 4 hours of weighed out food. I weighed out all my food, chicken, whatever the protein was, turkey, fish, weighed out the vegetables and weighed out the carbs. It was very important to get that first meal into the day. That's what got me going. That's what gives you your energy. But now it's very, very important what that carb looked like. So it would be an oatmeal. So we're talking, two kinds of carbs. There's a starchy carb and there's a complex carb. The starchy carb is your donuts, your pastries, your stuff that the cereal, the stuff that tastes really, really good. And as you know, when you eat it, you like, oh my gosh, I feel great, great, till about 2 hours later, and then you crash and you're like, oh my goodness, I need a pick me up. I need a coffee. And then what we do, a lot of people put sugar back in the coffee and that spikes that insulin back up, like Dr. Stephanie was talking about. So I would eat oatmeal, a complex carb, something that's going to keep your blood level, your blood sugars about like this, all the way across. So you, number one, you're going to stay fuller longer, but you're also going to have the energy to make it to either my workout or my next meal or whatever it was I was going to do. If I had to go do cardio, whatever it was, that was going to fuel me to get me to the next meal. So, and then it kind of looked like that repetitively, except for I did have a pre-workout meal. Something again, I needed a complex carb. I needed some protein to get me through the workout.
So
And
tell
then,
us what a complex carb is, and we'll do carbs in a minute. And yes, everyone who's asking, we are on the diet and nutrition portion. So if you go to your report, diet and nutrition, yes, the genes that I'm going to talk about are in that report. Sorry about that.
no, nice. So what did you want me to do? What do you
I
mean?
want you to talk about what a complex carb is.
So a complex carb, like I said, starchy carb is anything fast food, processed, donuts, pastries, any cereal. A complex carb is going to be anything that's more solid. Actually, on the outside of the grocery stores where I like to shop, it's going to be oatmeal. It's going to be sweet potatoes. It's going to be red potatoes. It's more solid. Again, complex carb is going to stay with you longer. It's better for you. It's real. I like to say it's real. I know a lot of people say, well, grains aren't really, a lot of them are processed, but it's a different, it's kind of like quinoa. It is a protein. The quinoa is a complete carb though, that's sustainable, that's not going to have this really blood sugar rush and then crash. So it's
Mhm.
really important because if you notice, what if y'all are ever out and you eat a donut, it's so good. I'm not gonna lie, yeah, a donut's good. But how do you feel afterwards? When you feel like an hour later, you're like, why am I so tired? Why do I feel sluggish? That's why. That's exactly right, because your blood sugars went up and then they went back down to nothing. So your body again's going, okay, I need something. I need something. Give me something. And it's like putting gas in your car. So what are you going to choose? You're going to choose the good gas, like Dr. Steve, or are you going to choose the bad gas? We're going back to a donut or a sugary coffee, or are we going to eat something a little more tangible that will last us longer?
Yeah, good points. So we've got a couple questions. David says, I thought oats spike your blood sugar. For a lot of us, they do. And I'm one of them. So I'm an O blood type, and I still love the blood type diet. And I think there's a lot of validity. There's been some of the science that has been disproven or debunked, kind of like the blue zones. The more time we have people that are researching the research, the more things we learn. We're finding a lot of that out right now in healthcare. But blood sugar blows, or oats blow my blood sugar. Now, part of the reason that is most people are using processed oats. They're not using the groats, the can that has the little seed looking thing in there. Instead, they're using the smashed flaked ones, or they're using the ones that they've pulled all the fiber out, and then you just instant. And instant has removed fiber. Fiber and fat will slow down your ability to absorb, and that's where that complex carbohydrate comes in. And also, what do most people put in oatmeal in the morning, even if they're doing the groats? They put in brown sugar, they put in skim milk, they put in a bunch of honey or sugar.
Mhm.
So it defeats part of the purpose of that. And yes, there are phytic acids and lectins and things that blow people out. So if you're someone like I am, who's a celiac or has issues with gluten, then unless you're having gluten-free oats and unless they are the groat form, then there's a problem. Now, oats themselves do not have gluten, but Most oats are grown in fields that are by wheat fields, or they rotate through the wheat fields, and then they put it in the big towers where they store it before they take it to process it. And it has all the wheat starch and the wheat dust in there. So my father was a cereal food processor. He went to school as an engineer and learned how to take wheat and turn it into flour, and take corn and turn it into corn oil or cornmeal or whatever. Well, our family are celiacs, but we were undiagnosed celiacs. So my father always brought flour home. I had severe allergies, but our celiacs is also related to, and this is for all of you who have kids, or maybe you've got that weird aunt. Like I had that weird aunt that was always bipolar, love her dearly, but I mean, she just couldn't get her act together. It took until she was 65 for them to diagnose her as a celiac, because 50% of the times when they take your blood for the gliadin test, hers would show up just fine. And the problem with that was our celiacs is related to schizophrenia, major depression, and bipolar disorder. So if you have kids or grandkids that can't get their heads together, or you can't figure out what's wrong with them, and they may not have stomach problems. My celiac is a silent celiac where I don't get stomach issues, but my father had colon cancer. And so I had an early test, and sure enough, I had 2 polyps. It takes 10 years to develop an adenocarcinoma, and mine were caught at about halfway. So if I had waited, I did my first one at 40. If I had waited to 50, which is the guideline, I would have had colon cancer by the time I was 50. So they removed those polyps. I had gotten a little loose with my diet, and then I tightened it up, and turned out my son was celiac. So I stayed on a tight diet with him. The rest of the family wasn't as thrilled about being strict gluten-free, but he had all the stomach issues and he had migraine issues. But when we cleaned up his diet, took him dairy-free, gluten-free, all of it went away, just like all of mine went away. So, we're going to jump to the carbohydrates, because we were talking about high carbohydrates. And honestly, that's my biggest problem with the whole vegan vegetarian thing, is the convenient foods with vegetarian tend to be very high in carbohydrates, and it's a strict carbohydrate. So I have a lovely little neighbor, and she is from India, and she is a strict vegetarian, and she had a baby, and her mama's not here. And so I became a surrogate grandma, and her baby had all sorts of trouble with his tummy, all sorts of trouble pooping. And she would bring him over. We'd massage his tummy. And I said, you've got to stop drinking milk. And she said, but I live on milk. I've had milk my whole life. Well, she had a lot of skin issues. And I said, just try it for 2 weeks. Well, as soon as she stopped drinking milk, her son stopped having gut problems. Then he stopped having pooping problems. And then she said, well, I just can't live without milk. And she went back on it. And it was the next day he started having problems. So she said, but my mother and my grandmother, we all had milk. My grandfather, well, I said, let's look at the family. Her mother had severe rheumatoid arthritis. Okay. That's an autoimmune disease related to diet and gut. Her father had severe high blood pressure and another autoimmune disease. And I said, if you're looking at the genetics and we can see we have weaknesses in these genes and we're not processing, I'm not saying you have to eat meat, but I'm saying we've got to restrict, we've got to turn to seeds or legumes or more vegetables, and less grains, less dairy for that. And we did her blood work. Her blood work was all out of balance. And she was willing, I raised chickens. So she wasn't willing to eat chicken, but she was willing to eat some egg. We introduced a little egg to the diet. We introduced a hard cheese that the lactose had been processed out of, because when a cheese hardens, it uses up the fermentation process. It uses up the lactose. So it's very low in lactose. And guess what? She could have a little bit of assaggio. She could have a little Parmesan. Her son didn't have problems with that. And interestingly was we were able to resolve almost all of their um, medical issues with skin, with energy, with pooping, with all by kind of modifying less grains, less processed dairy, and moving to ghee instead of butter for her, and some of those kind of things. So if we talk about the AMY1 gene, that is our starch metabolism. So AMY1 is TT, AT, or AA. TT is good starch metabolism. It reduces the association between starch consumption and weight gain. Now, I'm a TT. That means I should have no problem eating starch, but I will tell you, your DNA, while it is a blueprint, your epigenetics on how it manifests and what you do. I was going to make sourdough bread. I've moved out in the country. I've got my chickens. I'm fermenting everything. So I made my own gluten-free fermented starter. It took me the 2 whole weeks. I made my loaves. They turned out beautiful. They were so good. They were hot. I'm slathering them with butter. I gained 8 pounds in 1 month because I was eating sourdough pancakes and sourdough bread and sourdough crackers and way too much. My body cannot handle it. I am a meat and greens girl. I mean, like, I learned from my cancer, my body lives on eggs and spinach for breakfast and chicken and lettuce for dinner and beef and broccoli, So I have even the best starch metabolism, and yet my brain, when I have a starch, I spike and I crash and I feel horrible. And like I'm driving and I'm like doing this with my eyes, like I got to stay awake. I got to stay awake. I do not have good control of my insulin or of my blood sugar. Now, I saw a few minutes ago that Maria was saying that she's always been told her 90 was too high. Maria, I would challenge that, but I would have you also check your hemoglobin A1C. If your hemoglobin A1C is 5 or less, then who's ever telling you that your 90 is too high is incorrect. Hemoglobin A1C is a test to do like a 3-month running average for your average blood sugar, and that is going to give you a lot better analysis of it. So how do you, I know like athletes right before a big performance, whether it's the Super Bowl, whether it's a soccer game, they carb load the night before. Do you want to explain carb loading and why someone might want to use carbs and select those carbs for eating?
Cyclists are a huge carb load before a race the next day. Athletes are, I was not. We do a week before I go on stage, we do a carb load and then we do a carb deplete. So there's a whole method to that. But yes, like in other sports, carb loading gives you the energy for the next day. Now, I can tell you that I don't eat a lot of carbs. Once a week, I allow myself a cheat meal, and my cheat meal is a medium pizza. The whole entire thing. I eat the whole entire thing in one sitting. 9 times out of 10, yes, I do feel really bad afterwards, like bloated, sluggish. But my next day, I usually do legs the next day because my movements are explosive. Explosive. Now, that's all I eat. Don't get it twisted. I'm not like Wednesday, I think I'll have another pizza or no, 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 no. This is just my one cheat meal. But the carbs, the processed carbs gives you the energy and this explosive movement to get through a workout, a bicycle ride, a run. That's why you always see like people eating also carbs like bananas. Bananas are high in sugar. You see runners, they'll grab a banana and it's the carb and the high sugar that gets them to the spikes, it gets them to the next thing. I think food, like I said, food manipulation is so cool that done in the right way, if you know what you're doing, is very beneficial. So I wouldn't be like, oh, you could never have a banana or you could never have some spaghetti. Depending on what you're doing and what life is looking like and what you need to gather your energy for, then it looks really different. But yeah, it gives you explosive movements.
So your muscles are bags of sugar. Okay. And so when that muscle moves, it needs to collapse that. So if you're going to have a big physical day, carb loading the night before is an option for you, because you will pack that up and that will give you more. So if you know you're moving houses, if you know you've got to go help somebody because you're going to have a very physical day, having a carb meal the night before would be something. So one of the things that I said about the Amy gene on the TT is that's associated with good consumption. The AT is moderate metabolism and associated with weight gain. If you look at your report and see you're an AT or an AA, you would want to lower your carb count. Now, a lot of people are doing carnivore right now, which is only having meat products or animal products. And the hardcore carnivores are talking about steak, butter, bacon, so that is really good in autoimmunity. And both Felicia and I have tried the carnivore. What did you find when you were on carnivore?
I did this for you because you called me and you were like, I got something. I got something. And I was like, girl, okay, I'll do it. I even put my husband on it. He wanted to lose some weight, and he was, when I went to him first of all and said, okay, babe, you get meat and more meat and meat and we can have some cheese and you can get some butter. And he was like, why have you not put me on this years ago? I'm like, well, hold on, let's just, let's walk through this. But my husband did very, very well on it. 20 plus pounds fell off of him. He loved it. Um, I will say that I did it. I didn't lose as much weight as he did. For me, I needed more vegetables. And here's why we're talking like know your body. So I did it, but then there was just like 2 weeks later, I was like, my body's craving some vegetables. It was craving a piece of fruit. Um, and so I went back to putting some of that back in and I felt better. I realized that my headaches, I was having a little bit of headache, but um it I found out for me, it worked and I felt good, and then till it didn't anymore for me.
Mhm.
Now my husband, phenomenal, loves it, but his genes said he could do it. When I went back and looked at his DNA, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's a no-brainer. His body doesn't like carbs. His body
Mhm.
doesn't like carbs, so he thrived on this diet. He's
Mhm.
been on it for, when did we start that, Dr. Stephanie? Man, last year sometime.
I was going to say about 6 months ago.
Yeah, 6 months ago. He has introduced on weekends a little bit of carbs back in because reality in life. But he very small, but he's seen great things. What I know, you and your husband had phenomenal results
We did. We did.
because of your DNA. You gonna go back to genes
My
or
DNA says be careful with the fats. I did hardcore keto for a while, and that didn't work for me. So upping the protein and doing keto-ish, there's a group out there kind of now that talk about ketovore, meaning you stay keto and do the ketones. I do monitor my ketones. I find when I am actually just low ketone levels, if anybody's ever done it, you can do blood or you can do urine. I just do urine and I just do the strips, but I just need to be in mild ketosis. My brain works better. I don't gain weight. But the interesting thing for me is this all comes back to gut dysbiosis. So I see a couple questions about COVID. I see a couple questions about, other focuses. The point of tonight is to say there isn't a single diet. I can't tell you, gosh, carnivore is the only way to go. Mediterranean's the only way to go. I love what a Venn diagram is. And if you don't know what it is, if you imagine a circle and then you overlay another circle, and you overlay another circle, and you overlay, and right here in the center is where we see you. If we look at your DNA and yours says, oh my gosh, I don't have good insulin control. Oh, I can't handle fats real well, and I really process carbohydrates well. Well, then complex carbohydrates might be a good idea for you. So it's great that this circle says this, and then you say, okay, I'm going to try it. But in my case, I process carbs great, and yet I feel horrible. And when I look at my blood work, then I get another, objective test where I look at my blood work and my blood sugar spikes. And when my blood sugar spikes, then my lipids go up, then my LDLs go up, then my hemoglobin A1C goes up. And I say, so far, let's not continue down that road because A, I don't feel good. And B, I'm not getting the results I want. That's when you come back. So part of this is putting your detective hat on. What have I worked? What has worked in my diet? What has not worked in my diet? And, it may not be related all to diet, but there may be hidden little things in your diet. I can tell you, for me, as much as I was strict gluten-free, I was eating some packaged foods. They had modified food starch. They had some colorings, caramel coloring, and they aren't required to list gluten in those, but they had gluten in those. So I wasn't 100% gluten-free, not knowing. And when I had my next GI exam, I had erosion of my esophagus. I had erosion of my gastric tissues. I had erosions of my ileocecal, and it was like, wait a minute, where did all this come from? Turns out I had a tomato juice I was drinking that had some spices and seasonings in it, and the seasonings had gluten. So
Oh, wow.
I want you to put on your detective hat and go, what diets have I tried? Put this on your diet journal, like we talked about. And we talked about, okay, let's write down, what have I tried? What am I eating right now? What bags of starch do I have that maybe I'm not realizing, because those bags of starch turn into sugars? What do my macros look like? There's plenty of free carb counters or macro counters that will calculate your fats, your proteins, your carbohydrates. Felicia, what amount of protein do you recommend for someone who wants to put on muscle, who wants to stabilize blood sugar, who wants to, up their ability to be more vital?
My recommendation is 1 gram per pound that you weigh. So let's say you weigh 100 pounds, you need 100 grams of protein a day. Now, I know a lot of people are like, holy cow, there is no way. How am I going to get that? I, and I know it's a lot, but if you can get as close as possible, you'll reach it. And there's other little tricks and hacks to use. There, and it all depends on what kind of diet you're eating, but there's protein in nuts, eggs, of course, all the meats, um, collagen. There's some hidden proteins in collagen. There's also some in protein drinks. As long as they're very clean, you got to really look. I encourage y'all also to learn how to read a label. Learn how to read the back of a label. What does it say? And in the ingredients, the first 3 ingredients are the main things in this food. But now when you go all the way down, it's going to say there's a lot of words, fancy words that you can't say, and anything with a los on the end, like sucrose, los, any of those loses, that's bad. That's not good. So if you'll learn how to read a label, you in education, and again, like we were talking about the journal, if you'll write this stuff down, I'm talking if it's even half a cookie, 30 minutes later, be like, okay, I feel blah, or I don't have any energy, or I'm really tired, or I'm bloated. That's another one. I'm bloated. Or why do I feel like indigestion? All these things, because a lot of times we feel these things and you just kind of blow it off. Like, okay, I'll grab a Tums and you just move on. And that's not the answer. I mean, it's the answer in the moment, but it's really not the answer. Let's fix it so that you feel better, so that you have a better outcome, and we function different. We just function better.
Mhm.
So that will help.
So I know that a lot of people are putting their things in and going, can I do this? Can I do that? We're not going to actually have enough time to go through all those individuals, but we are going to start taking questions in a few minutes. So if you want to put a question in, we'll try to get to that. I see a quick comment in the chat about my best friend asked me if gluten-free beer is safe because of the immunogenic peptides in it. I do not know. The litter's controversial. So a lot of gluten-free beer is not gluten-free. It is gluten reduced. They made the beer and then they stripped the gluten out and they cannot get it all. The USDA allows 10 to 20 parts per billion. But for many of us, that's still too much. I am a zero gluten girl. So there are some glutens or gluten-free beers that do have zero, but most of them are gluten removed or low gluten. So if they are strict gluten-free, like I'm strict gluten-free, I don't. Plus, it's from a grain and beer on the glycemic index. So what's the glycemic index? Glycemic index is how much does it spike that blood sugar? Remember, we talked about storage mode, we talked about burn mode, we talked about starvation mode. Beer on a scale of 1 to 100 is 110. So that's why people get beer bellies. You've heard of beer bellies. It spikes so high, the insulin grabs it, packs it away as fat, and it makes it visceral fat. So if somebody says, oh my gosh, I've got this beer belly going, and all they do is cut out that beer, then all of a sudden they trim down. Why? They took that big insulin spike out. I will tell you that one of the biggest things you can do for any dieting, whether it's to gain or to lose, is again, control your metabolism, control your hormones. This is all about metabolic health. So your insulin, your thyroid, your DHEA, if you're a woman looking at your hormones, you can control your hormones by the foods you eat. If you are low in estrogen, you eat more estrogenic foods like a soybean and edamame. You know, if you're low in progesterone, you can use a wild yam or use a wild yam cream. So all of this can be manipulated, but this takes either you working with one of like the DNA company practitioners or one of the people who's going through our training, because there's so many little nuances. It's like, okay, so you can't do the fat, like mine says I can't do the fat, but I do process the fat. I process it well. It says I'm great with the carbs, but I don't do great. Well, why don't I do great? Well, because my gut will never, ever, ever be able to heal. I was on 9 to 10 rounds of antibiotics for almost a decade. I have wrecked my gut. But I will tell you, even though it says I'm moderately okay with dairy, I don't eat any like milk off the shelf, but I can use colostrum because colostrum is more of a immunological, and you have your immunoglobulin G in there and your immunoglobulin M, and that heals my gut so that I can actually tolerate. I tolerate hard cheeses. I can tolerate raw milk. Again, I'm fortunate to live in the country and raw milk is accessible. But if I looked at my DNA, I would say no, carbs are all of it, and fat is out, and dairy is out. And that's not actually the case. So part of this is, again, go back and put your investigation hat on. I think everybody should fast at least quarterly. I tend to fast daily. And I used to do an 18-hour fast. I'm now in my 60s. I can't go as far as the 18 hours. 14 to 16 hours is where I feel my best. And women, you don't want to push it too hard because you will actually start putting weight on going into that starvation mode. Balancing your hormones, looking at your DNA, noticing your body, looking at your blood work. You know, a lot of times doctors will say, oh, your blood work looks fine. And you see things that are at either end of the range. You want to optimize, whether you're working with a nurse practitioner, whether you're working with a functional medicine health coach, whether you're working with a DNA coach that knows how to look at blood work and look at DNA. We kind of put all of these pieces together until we find what is best for you. So let's, Alicia, let's go to some of the questions and see if we can do that. And then maybe we can have some more discussions with some of these. So Faye says, Stephanie, which supplement did you take to reduce your sugar cravings when you were on your diet? I think it was a powder. Yes, inositol, inositol, inositol.
It's a big one.
Yeah. And literally, inositol looks like sugar, tastes like sugar. It's like powdered sugar. Put it on my tongue, suck on it till it all dissolved and stopped my cravings. Now, I will tell you the reason I went on the carnivore was because I was going to be interviewed on a carnivore podcast. And I wanted to be able to literally, because I'd done paleo most of my life, I wanted to be able to say that I understood the carnivore community and the good, bad, and the ugly. Well, the great thing about that was, the first week or two, I thought it was a little tough. And then what we did is really kind of got into that groove and felt fabulous, slept less, craving stopped, like no sugar cravings whatsoever. And I went, oh, I'm going through some massive healing. So I used inositol before. Now I realize that if I
Cut out for a hot second.
Yeah.
You cut out for a hot second.
Oh,
You
I
said
cut
you're
out.
realizing what?
Oh, I realized for me, again, going super low carb while I'm not strict carnivore, because I missed arugula. I love arugula. I missed turnips.
Wow.
So,
Turnips.
but like breakfast for me is eggs because I have chickens, and then I will do some leftover protein from the night before. Lunch tends to be some type of a protein, whether it's chicken breast, whether it's canned sardines, whether it's, some kind of a sliced roast or something. And then I will do raw vegetables. So we do super low carb because I sleep better. I maintain my health better. My blood sugar is optimized. All of my numbers. I went from like a 5.4, which is a fine hemoglobin A1C, the 3-month running average, to a 4.8 by cutting down on my carbs. So, a lot of people will say 100 carbs or less is low carb. I find I do best at 20 to 50 carbs. So if I have a 50 carb day, then I will bring it down the next day to 10 to 20 carbs. And protein, I find keeps me strong, keeps me vital, keeps my skinny jeans fitting, keeps me able to work out. I walk 4 to 5 miles a day and push all sorts of stuff around, lifting heavy things to do the chicken water or whatever else. So inositol is what we were talking about. Seed oils, to use or not to use. Felicia, do you know anything about seed oils?
I think yes. And it also depends on your DNA.
Mhm.
Can you handle it? Can you not? Again, we're all individuals, depending on how you process foods and how it makes you feel. I do think there is a definite difference in knowing and if you do take it, what is a good seed oil versus a bad seed oil, or just an oil in general. Sometimes I run across people that are like, well, I don't understand the whole oil thing. It's like I'm supposed to be over here and no, and so it gets kind of complicated unless you know like what seed oil is and where to get it and the good stuff.
Mhm.
What do you
So
recommend?
seed oils, so rapeseed is canola oil, but because of the connotation with the word rape, it was not then, uh, they changed the name to canola oil. Sunflower oil, safflower oil, all of these oils are processed under high heat. The problem with oil is that it then begins to go rancid. If you notice, the highest quality oils are in dark packages, so dark green bottles or black bottles, and then they're in smaller amounts and they're more pricey. It's because they haven't oxidized. So with oxidation, you can go look at your GSTP and your TM and look at those oxidative, species. So look at your DNA report. Do you process oxidation? Do you get high levels of oxidation, which leads to more rapid aging, or do you need lower levels? I only use natural oils. The closer that I can get to processing, we use a ton of butter. Again, we have our own cow butchered. So we've got tallow. I use some lard. I use some ghee. So those are less processed and more available that the body knows what to do with. The problem with our diet in the last several years, last several decades, is that things have become more and more processed and lesser real. And the body does not understand all the fake foods. If you look at the Daniel diet that a lot of mega churches are doing, it's getting back to whole foods. If you look at Whole30, it's getting back to blueberries are a real food. Blueberry muffins are not. Okay. Does it mean that you can't have a blueberry muffin every now and then? No, it doesn't mean that. But save it for special occasions and savor the blueberries. Having done carnivore for several months, now when I have a blueberry, oh my gosh, it is an explosion. And I now realize when people say, gosh, that's like God's candy. All the fruits and stuff are so, my taste became so much more alive. One of the questions we have is from Astrid. She said, I was vegan for 2 years and felt amazing. I lost 60 pounds at 68 years old. Then she said, Cash looked at her DNA and said she shouldn't be vegan. So now 6 months into eating some meat and dairy, she's gained 25 pounds back, has less energy, and it's going to go up. So what should I eat? So I hope if you've got nothing else out of today is to realize your DNA, Astrid, is a blueprint. It's just like, okay, you made a house print and it says, this is where the kitchen goes. This is where the living room goes. But you can tweak it. You can say, I'm not going to use a dining room because I don't have a dining room table. That's going to be a rec room. You can move things around. If you felt good, if your blood work corroborated that you were doing well, then go back to the vegan diet. Now, you may need to add some protein, and that may have been what he was talking about, but could you just add an egg instead of some meat? Could you find a way to food combine so that you get complete proteins? Could you take a protein supplement? A lot of vegans aren't willing to do that if it is a preference where I love organ meat capsules, whether it's liver capsules or beef, liver, heart, kidney. Out in the wild, an animal, when it kills another animal, a predator, they go straight for the internal organs. They go for the heart and the guts and the kidneys and all of that because they're so nutrient dense. So if you want to go back to being vegan, but if you need to take a liver capsule to get your iron up so that you're not anemic or something, that may be a way to get your B12 or to get that iron level that you're not getting from other things. So just because somebody said you should, if you don't feel 100%, you have a PhD in Astrid, and I want you to trust that. I want you to trust that. So Chantel, it says, how do you navigate eating lifestyle food lists? You must be on low oxalate due to digestive enzymes. So do you care if I take this one, Felicia?
No, go for it.
Okay. So one of the things with digestive enzymes is digestive enzymes, amylase breaks down carbohydrates, lipase break down lipids, proteases break down proteins. If your gut is out of whack, one of the first things you need to do is get on some probiotics, or you can get a gut test like a gut 360 and see what parts of your body are out of whack. What probiotics do you need? What probiotics are you too high on? Are they complementary? Are they communal? is there a certain area that you're lacking at the top of your GI tract or at the end? So I really like our gut tests, but a good basic digestive enzyme. Enzymes are what break all your food down. And if your gut is out of whack, or most people don't realize it, they actually have low digestive acid, and that low digestive acid does not allow the food to break down. And then you're putting out stinky, yucky poop because it's not broken down and it's putrefying. So a low oxalate food diet, you can supplement with a digestive enzyme and some probiotics to help that. So low oxalates are very high, like in spinach. So people who love all those greens but can't have those because oxalates can make you, it's very painful. You can get kidney stones. You get just all over feeling kind of yucky. Again, Chantel, this is take your DNA, take your, you need to do low oxalate, take your low oxalate list, take how your all your lab tests are doing, take how you feel, overlap that. It may be a small little triangle. I will tell you, for the 2 years that I was unraveling my health, it was a very small triangle. It was literally no fruits, no vegetables, no condiments. No, it was a protein and a green, and mine were high oxalates, but fortunately I processed those well. You need to find for you, looking at your DNA, looking at what works. And if you're struggling with that, then having a functional dietetic practitioner, having a functional genomic practitioner look at that and say, okay, here are the baby steps that you're going to try and take. But it may be a limited food list, but as that gut heals, you will be able to add things back. My DNA test that it says I should be on a low saturated fat diet. Is tahini high in saturated fat? No, I don't think so, because the tahini is from sesame seeds. I'm going to look that up. While Felicia, will you talk about intermittent fasting for a minute?
Yeah. Intermittent fasting, they say is one of the crazes that works on a lot of people, especially women. They also do say, though, you need to make sure that you're healthy enough to do an intermittent fasting. That means, so what intermittent fasting is you pick a time frame that you're not going to eat. You can drink water, obviously, but you don't eat any food. And then when that time is up, say if it's, and there's many different fasts. There's like an 8-hour intermittent fasting, and then there's a 10-hour intermittent fast. You can break them up how you want to. I have done them. I have found the best results that if I did let me remember here, a 4-day, 8-hour fast, and then one day I did a 12-hour fast, and then the 7th day I didn't fast at all. I tried to keep it rotating, so my body kept guessing, because a lot of time when you fast, when you're going to eat. Your body doesn't know when it's going to eat, and it stores fat. So it also has to go in for what you're eating when you do go back to eating. So when you break your fast, which is so important, it's really important what you're going to eat. Needs to be a protein, needs to be, a healthy carb, like we talked about, and vegetables and fruit, however it looks to you. Again, it's that when it comes to fasting, it's different across the board. I can tell you it did work for me. I felt really good. I had some big changes. But when I looked it all down and I wrote it all down, it was my calorie depletion that I had lost the weight with. Now, I being a competitor, eating every 3 or 4 hours, I just didn't feel real good on it. Now it does work. I know a lot of people did do it really, really well and love it. So I'm not against it at all. But you do need to listen to your body. You don't want to do a fast where you don't feel good, and you don't want to fast so long that um, especially if you're a diabetic and stuff. I think there's a lot to look at your health wise before you go into a fasting protocol. Stephanie, what do you think about fasting? Do you like it?
Oh, I love fasting. And I think people should try at least quarterly doing a fast. In addition to that, I think the studies, the longevity studies, because a majority of our participants tonight wanted to talk about longevity. The studies show that historically, through different religious groups that fast, whether it's Ramadan, whether it is on high holidays for the Catholic religion or the Jewish religion, that long term, those fasting periods were periods of cleansing, periods of detoxification. And the longevity studies are showing that intermittent fasting regularly or quarterly are some of the most powerful things they can do for longevity. Victor Longo has written a book called the Fast Mimicking Diet, where you do get to eat between 500 and 800 calories, but they're very specific foods, and your body will go into a fasting type analysis. And with that fasting type analysis, it will burn off the sentient cells, it will burn off damaged cells. And so it's very powerful to add fasting to your diet regimen or throughout the year. So I
This
think
is
it's
where I
great.
say that one size doesn't fit all, right? So that's why
Exactly.
you look at
Mhm.
all these diets, and if it fits in your DNA, I say go for it. Try it. And if you like it, it's life is too short to be miserable. It's like, you got to find a happy medium. Like, okay, I'm going to eat this or I'm not going to eat that. And then in moderation. So, and how you feel. So I think that, we're on the right track with talking to people saying that, well, my blood sugar's this and that. And it's all about educating yourself and learning what's going to help you get to your next meal, but also you're happy about it, right? Because
Exactly.
nobody wants anybody who knows, like, have you ever heard that? I'm hangry, not angry, hangry. That's hungry and because and you're angry because you're hungry. Nobody wants to be there, right? Nobody. So, but no, I think fasting I'm not against it. I think again, it's individualized.
Well, I think a lot of things people take too far. So, I think small amounts of fasting are great, but the body, depending on your composition, needs to be able to burn off. If your fat holds toxins and you don't detoxify well, you're going to struggle with detoxification during your fasting. You're going to feel poorly. So look at your, glutathione genes. Look at your ability to detoxify. If you have trouble with that, you're going to have to maybe add methylated Bs. You're going to have to add positive things to lower your reactive species for your ability to lower that burden, that toxic load. Faye, I looked up. So it's interesting. Sesame oil is 1.9 grams of saturated fat, 5.4 grams of monosaturated fat, and 5.6 grams of polyunsaturated. So it has a little bit of all. So if you are looking for a low saturated fat diet, yes, tahini would fix into that. And it is super yummy. So I'm sure you are happy to hear that. Uh, Donna says, since I have type 2 diabetes and I was told not to eat oatmeal because it would raise my blood sugar, what do you think? I would agree, Donna, that again, the oatmeal that is the most effective are the groats and not the processed by any means. But a lot of diabetics have a real problem with their carb load. And so you'll need to look at how you respond. If you have a blood sugar meter, have a dose of oatmeal and then be able to take your blood sugar and see if it raised. Okay. I've had patients who were monitoring their blood sugar and they were in the 200s and they were in the 300s. But the problem with that was that they weren't measuring in the right time. They didn't do that early in the day measurement, and then which was their fasting, and then 2 hours, it's called postprandial, 2 hours postprandial, check your blood sugar. If you're in that 2 and 300, oatmeal isn't working for you. Then next day, have some eggs and bacon and see where it are. If you're down at 150, 170, you're like, okay, so I need to be an eggs and bacon lady. Okay, and not the oatmeal. I would be very careful on grains as a type 2 diabetic. Eliminating, that was the whole basis of the Atkins diet, was stabilizing blood sugar with that fat and doing the different phases of keto for that. Are you concerned about glyphosate on oats? I've heard about the desiccants for things like oats and chickpeas. I absolutely am concerned about glyphosate. I think glyphosate is so overused, and there's a whole talk in the celiac community about, is it really a gluten intolerance or is it a glyphosate intolerance? Because glyphosate is a pesticide. And with that pesticide, it is destroying all those live probiotics in your gut. And so you're opening up this space where your body begins to break down. And then the tight junctions begin to weaken. It's almost like a fish net that was tight, keeping the big fish in, but the little fish out, but it gets looser and looser until those medium-sized fish can swim away. So really in the source of grains, you really need to look more at the organic grains or stay off of grains. Does the Budwig diet exclude all oils except coconut oil? So Budwig, for people who aren't aware, it has to do with cottage cheese, flaxseed oil, and was used in a lot of anti-cancer diets. I don't know a ton about it, but I know that the flaxseed is extremely beneficial, and it does. So I wouldn't be able to give you a whole answer, because I know about it, but not a ton about it. Are steel cut oats the same as the groats? Yes, they are. Yeah, they are. So then Diane asked, can you discuss if celiac is DNA related? So celiac is DNA related. Your DNA can be a celiac sensitive gene, or a celiac gene. A celiac gene means when gluten touches your membranes, then that gluten, which is a protein, will touch that and it will cause it to stick. Just like if you put a handprint on a refrigerator and it sticks and then it melts, almost dissolves those tissues. And by dissolving those tissues, then you make those big holes in your gut. And so our gut has all these villi, these little fingers, and the more gluten you have, those villi go away and it becomes just a tube that goes through, and there's malabsorption. So what we want to do is we want to avoid that. Now, gluten sensitivity, you may have upset stomachs, you may have inflammation, you just don't have that melting of the villi or the opening of those passages. Our test does test for both gluten sensitivity and for celiacs, and gives you a result whether you have nothing to worry about, something you should be cautious of. But again, a lot of the celiac issues or a lot of the gut issues right now are related to the glyphosate, as we were talking earlier. So what's the best protein to eat or drink, Susan asked. Could you address that, Felicia?
Oh, wow. I don't know the best. I say anything that's clean and not processed, but protein, there is actually a wide range, all kinds of meats, but make sure that they're good. Well, I'm not talking dairy. What am I saying? Processed meats like
She's not talking baloney, because that's
yeah,
just
thank you.
baloney.
I'm not talking baloney. You can't just be like, okay, I'm gonna have lunch meat. Lunch meat is really not good. Not out of the package. I'm talking like beef, chicken, fish, turkey, um, anything that's high. It's kind of like, what do you really like though when it comes to protein? Nuts are really good, but you can't have a whole bunch of them. But I really like the variety because I want to get my protein from yogurt and from eggs and from beef and from nuts. And there's a lot of little things. I don't know that there's one best protein out there. Do you, Dr. Nelson? one best protein. I think it's what you like, you know?
Well, I think it's what you can digest. So that gets
Yes.
back to some people struggle to digest red meats. Fishes are the easiest to digest.
Mhm.
Eggs are the most complete source of everything. If you had to live on one thing, I would probably live on eggs and seeds just because they're so nutrient packed. If you think about this, the egg is really a seed and it will grow into a chicken. So it's got to have everything in that life source to feed and fuel the body. Now, there are a lot of people that have egg allergies, so that may or may not work for them. But a seed is the same thing. That is going to pop into a plant. So seeds and eggs tend to have the most bang for the buck. That's also why if you're going to eat a bread, a sprouted grain bread is easier to digest because the phytic acid has been pulled away. And because that nutrient density goes really high. So looking at those as a source of maximizing, I really like for people to, okay, so I feel really good on fish, but I get hungry right away. Okay. I feel really good on chicken, but I don't like the dark meat and I don't like the skin. I only like, so play with those, but see how does your body feel? How does your blood work look? Who are you working with to really tune in? I mean, do you have a friend? Do you have a family member? Do you have a nutritionist? Do you need a consult? And, you know, the DNA company has packages for people to go through. I know a lot of people are asking about real specific genes tonight. I've mentioned several of the genes in mine because I can't pull up each of yours. And then my whole idea of interplay there is it says this in the blueprint, but this is the reality. The reason I bring that up as an example is I don't want you to get locked into, hey, mine says this, I can never do that again. That may not be true for you. There, you've got to overlay other things. You've got to overlay how do you feel? You've got to overlay what does your blood work look like? You've got to overlay what is the history, like in my family, look like. And when you overlay those, then you will find that little piece in the center where you doing that. Normal blood sugar is always 120 to 80. Why did it change? Well, it depends on when you're testing it. Are you doing fasting? Are you doing postprandial? Are you doing it right before bed? So if you're saying 80 to 120, what did you eat the night before? Did you eat a whole bunch of carbs and therefore your insulin didn't process well? And so you're spiking in the morning. That's one thing when I have type 2 diabetics and they've been, you know, solid 100, 100, 110, 110. All of a sudden they get a 130 or 140. I'm like, what'd you eat for dinner last night? Well, I had a piece of cornbread.
Yeah.
Okay, well, cornbread is not your friend. So that that may be something for you to think of is if you're going to have a treat like that, have it earlier in the day so that it can burn off and not late in the day where it goes into storage mode and then spikes. What does it mean when you eat carnivore and your blood glucose goes up? Well, even when you're eating carnivore, you're going to turn things into blood sugar. It could be you're eating too much of the fat. It could be that your body's not able to break down. There's a whole glyconeogenesis that happens. And it could be that you need more fiber. So I really, even though I love that whole super low carb, there's a lot of people that need to add fiber to their diets if they're going to do that super low carb and that carnivore. Carnivores tend to only use the bathroom every, 2 or 3 days because there is very little residual. So they're not building up that waste. But when they add some resistant fiber back, like a green banana powder, maybe some psyllium husk, maybe flax powder, and you put that back in, then you can add a little more bulk and a lot of that will stabilize blood sugar. Every source I've checked strongly suggests an ounce of protein for every body. I'm a little older. I weigh a lean 200. I have an 8-hour eating window, but I can't possibly eat more than 70 to 80 grams of protein. That's 20 to 30 ounces per meal, mostly grass-fed, pasture-raised. No matter how active I am, I have plenty of energy. Do I really need to eat more? Tom's asking you, Felicia.
Tom, I think you're doing wonderful. I'm proud of you. And if you have lots of energy, I think that's great. I mean, I would like to know how often you're eating a day. Is it because you're not hungry, or is it because are you eating 3 meals a day? Are you grazing all day? What does it look like? Are you also working out? I want to know. Sometimes when the more active you are, the more hungry you are, so you would tend to eat more, protein. But what do you do for a snack? So you need a snack. I would also I would want to know what your meals look like. And could you put in an extra piece of chicken? How many, for a 200-pound guy, if you're active, your protein at any meal should be like 4 ounces, 4 to 5 ounces of lean beef. So it would I'd kind of have to know a little more information, but I think you're doing a heck of a job. I love that you're lean, 200 pounds, 6'1". You say that you're, grass-fed and pasteurized beef. I think that's wonderful. And you have great energy. So I would just keep doing what you're doing and maybe throw in a little extra meat at dinner, depending again, how many ounces are you eating at a time? I don't know. A guy like you, once again, should be at least 4 to 5 ounces. So
Yeah.
that's my take. But keep going,
So
Tom. Good
the
job.
the the fabulous thing that I see about this, I see we have a huge interest. The fabulous thing about this is this was a pretty wide topic, a wide topic with all the different diets,
Yes.
all the different genes, all the different options. I would like, as we've come to the end of our time, I would like us to talk to the powers that be, and talk to our marketing and talk to our C-level staff and redo this. Maybe we do a fat only and a carb only, and we pull out a DNA report so we can go through that. I know a lot of people had specific questions. I've got this and this and this. The
I
biggest
agree.
thing that I would say is, take time and invest in yourself, either through DNAU, through a episodic event with one of our practitioners, or get yourself on one of our programs where you get, a couple sessions with a certified genetic counselor that's going to go in and look at your genes, look at your DNA, look at your lifestyle, and really help you. I mean, we hope that you took away one or two things. There is a whole replay for this. You can go
Mhm.
back and pull your report out. You can go back and look at your DNA. And then, we talked about the TCF7L2. We talked about the AMY gene. We talked about the ApoOA2. We talked about the glutathione genes. So we talked about a lot of specific genes and then kind of weaving in between them. But if you really want to know about your own, let's get you set up with somebody that can help you, really dial it in. The best investment you can make is in yourself. And like Felicia said, it was so important for her to learn what worked for her body so that she could actually optimize, and she still does. And that is the most important thing. Is we love your engagement. We love that you're here learning. This is not an overnight where
No.
you just, stop. You can also get your DNA app. We've got a free app. You can
Mm.
go in, you can load it. You can get way more information about your DNA and looking specifically. But we'll talk to them about breaking this into better bite-sized chunks so that we can address more of those specifics for you. Whether you go to the Google Play Store to get the DNA app, whether you go to the App Store for Apple. We just appreciate you being here. We appreciate your interaction. There will be a replay that'll be sent out, and then you can go back through. So thanks for your time. Thanks for your interaction. We appreciate you so much. Have a blessed night. God bless everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.